Hi, my name is Iam Burn and I'm a photographer and photo-based visual artist based in Sunderland. In my reflective research-led photo-based practice, I combine various visual strategies, genres and media together. Using photography, multimedia and archival imagery, I've focused a lot on various aspects of mental health, as well as looking at the responsibility to the social and political capacity of photography. Here is the artist statement that I created for my project once. I'll give you a few moments to sit and read that. My initial objective was to research the subject of loss. This was motivated from a personal epiphany. I'd lost my mother after a short illness in 2015, and to keep other family members supported and aid their well-being, I didn't allow myself time to grieve. I came to this realisation in early 2020 and as a result concluded that I'd never be able to properly grieve for my mother. Too much time had passed. I wouldn't benefit from dwelling over the past. It would likely have affected my mental health, and it was not a gamble I felt I could take. Therefore, I had to acknowledge that my loss would never be fully laid to rest within me. I wondered if others had had similar experiences, and it made me think about wider issues of loss and how it connects us. We all suffer bereavement in our life, but we experience it at different times and in diverse ways. Some may encounter a difficult relationship breakdown, and again, the experiences will vary and the impact on the individual's life will be different. Loss has impacted on the lives of humans for thousands and thousands of years, and it will exist until we become extinct. I wanted to investigate this theme and develop work that looked at some of the different aspects of loss. As loss is something that is felt on a personal level, I wanted to reflect this in my work. Although loss can be a positive thing, many forms of loss have negative connotations. Many people deal with the impacts of losses behind closed doors and not necessarily in a healthy or productive way. As a result, I wanted to have a nod to the domestic within this work. I felt that using domestic archival photographs would help me to achieve this. Having photographs containing ordinary, everyday people shot by an amateur hand lends itself to the thought of framed photos hanging in a family home or within a personal space, or contained within a photo album. I collect old photographs and have developed my own archive, and I've utilised this to create other works previously. I've worked with text with archival images before, and I wanted to push this idea further. Also, could I use editing within the images in some way? Would I be able to use my own creative writing as text to sit alongside those images? Could I marry the two together to make a coherent body of work? I wanted to challenge myself and investigate these thoughts. When approaching the addition of text, my instincts were to use haiku, as it would allow a degree of varied interpretation when paired with the image. I've always tried to make work that can work on different levels for different people. It sparks debate and allows people to take away from the work whatever they feel is relevant to them. Once I placed text and image together, I could see that I had a solid basis for this work. Although not every pairing worked, through trial and error I increased the number that were effective. Rewriting haiku and scanning and trying new images, trying and sometimes succeeding and sometimes failing, assured me I was strengthening this body of work as time passed. And I also found that the meditative nature of writing haiku was very beneficial to me on a personal level. While experimenting with the creation of images, I decided to try something different just out of curiosity. Instead of focusing on blanking out people from existing archival photographs, which was my initial approach, I decided to cut people out instead. I pondered on the idea of adding these cutout figures to an existing image. So I placed a family having fun on a picnic into a photograph of a forest near the Chernobyl reactor. It contained a warning sign highlighting radiation danger. The juxtaposition of the two images seemed to be more powerful than I'd expected. I realised that there was more being said than I'd first recognised. The happiness of the people mixed with the devastation around them. The excitement of all things nuclear energy from the 50s and 60s, which was around the time the initial archival photograph was taken, being placed into the location where all the challenges and dangers of nuclear power came home to roost. I began to see a different kind of loss, environmental loss. I considered what environmental loss meant to people. It became clear that unlike personal loss, which is shared but at different points in our lives, environmental loss affects everybody simultaneously every day. The loss of rainforests creates a causality that has an impact on 7.5 billion people on the planet. Those impacts may be subtle at first glance, but the knock-on effect seen in other areas of the world we live in builds the intensity of those influences. After a lot of consideration, I felt combining both ideas would be the best way forward. I believed that the two image variations would complement each other, strengthening the initial idea of loss and its effect on people. As part of my research, I started looking at artists who have used collage within their work and started to research artists who are particular favourites of mine, so the likes of Hannah Hoch and Robert Rauschenberg. Also looking at people like Wallace Berman and Peter Kennard. Kennard particularly is somebody whose work I greatly admire. During my research, I discovered a photograph from the Omagh bombing in Northern Ireland in 1998. It showed a photograph that had been taken just seconds before the bomb exploded, killing 29 people and injuring over 300. Everyone in the photograph had been blanked out in white to protect their identities out of respect. And what struck me immediately was the impact the image had on me. Seeing these anonymous people made me think about who they are. Why were they there? What made them go to Omagh that fateful day, and what happened to them afterwards? The lack of identifiable features prompted me to impose my own thoughts into the empty void. I couldn't tell if they were young, old, male, female, black or white, and this really opened up the image to my imagination. This reaffirmed my thoughts of using old images with people blanked out to hide their identity. You cannot be influenced by the person in the image if you can't see who they are. When it came to actually thinking about displaying the work, I wanted to bring in that influence of the homely. So, as you will see in a later slide, I've selected a more familiar exhibition style of frame, but one that has a nod to the basic domestic homely frame. And I also placed the image in text inside a large mount, so the eye is drawn directly to the centre of that frame. And although I have written haiku occasionally over recent years, I've never spent any length of time researching it or practicing the art form. But by reading various books on haiku, both in terms of how to write it and examples of other haiku writers, I became more comfortable with this form of poetry. And by spending regular periods of time writing verse, I slowly began to improve. My word choices came a little easier, and following the haiku structure became less of a challenge. I became more confident in showing my verse to others. Ultimately, I gained from this experience of creating this project a very simple understanding in the end. Loss is a huge part of our lives. The environment is our life. They are both equally important in different ways. They both need greater understanding, debate and support. And I hope by creating this work and having it seen in the public domain may have contributed in some small way to this. One thing I was very mindful of when I approached this subject was the effect it may have had on me personally. Obviously, this was triggered by a personal trauma and a personal realization. And I can't stress enough, and this goes back to something from previous experience within my work, that if you are going to tackle a subject that is personal to you, has some very deep-seated emotional connection to you, you do need to make sure that you have things in place should you find that you start to struggle. Now, within this project, I was actually okay, but that is partly through past experience of delving into things around mental health and not necessarily having the best things in place to support me. So please, if you're looking to do a body of work yourself, do bear that in mind. Ultimately, you can't make good work if you're unwell. Although this project hasn't yet gone out into a public exhibition space, this is largely due to the situation around COVID. It's been very difficult to find anywhere where you can display work. It is something that I am looking to get out there. If anybody is watching this and seeing these images who perhaps is a curator, has a space they would like to exhibit this work in, please get in touch. My contact details will be at the end. But to give you an idea how I see this work being displayed, I've included a couple of different variations of how I see the gallery space looking. And I say a gallery space, you know, an exhibition space, a gallery space would work perfectly well with this work, but I could also see it working in other areas as well. So I could see it in a domestic space, I could see it in a commercial space where the link to how the commercial practices can affect environment and things like that start to come into play. So I do see it as a very versatile piece of work that could sit comfortably in a number of different locations. Ultimately, it is my passion to get this work out there. It's something I really want other people to see. And it's great that Photograd have given me the opportunity to share this with you via their virtual exhibition. And I'm very appreciative of that. My next step is to get this work out in a physical space. And hopefully, as things are progressing with COVID, that will be sooner rather than later. If you do want to get in touch, either if you've got questions about how I did the work, perhaps you're a current student and you'd like some advice about researching work or developing your work, or about the student experience, then drop me an email. It's there on the screen. Alternatively, if you want to have a look at my work, go and visit my website or pop onto my Instagram or Facebook. Thank you very much for watching. Very much appreciated. Thank you, Photograd. Best wishes.